is your complete beginner's guide, the complete user's guide, whatever you want to call it, to the Garmin Instinct 3 series, both the Solar Edition as well as the AMOLED Edition. I've been using the watch for a while now, not just myself, but also my wife, putting it through its paces over the course of a whole bunch of different sports and activities. With that, I've got a bunch of experience with this watch, but also with Garmin watches for the last decade and a half or so. So I'm going to talk through every single feature on this watch. Well, the majority of the features, there's 1,000 features on this watch. I'm going to talk through how to use this watch from start to finish, starting off with which models you have, kind of your options for displays, the pros and cons to that, getting into activity tracking and sport tracking and navigation and all the GPS settings, some of the training readiness features, and all the things you need to know to use this watch. It's as simple as that. Now note, this is not my full review where I talk about what's good and bad. That's up in the corner there, though I will certainly talk about what's good and bad, but the majority of that good and bad thing is in the video up there. This is more about how to use the watch as a guide. It should be about 45 minutes long. We'll see once I'm done recording it, and it's designed to be a long-form beginner's guide. But one quick thing to note is this video is sponsored by Precision Fuel and Hydration. More about them a little bit later on in the video. Okay, with that, I'll just simply dive into it. The very first thing to note is there are two display options on the Instinct 3. There's an AMOLED display seen on the left, and then there's a solar display seen on the right there. The solar display is a MIP-based display or a memory and pixel display, like all past Instinct lineups, versus the AMOLED display is what you might have seen on the new 400/965 or 265, kind of very similar to an Apple Watch display. In a nutshell, AMOLED displays are much more brilliant, much more vibrant, have all these colors. In the case of the MIP-based display on the Instinct, it is a black and white monochrome display, though Garmin does have other color MIP-based displays, but not in the case of the Instinct. With the MIP-based display, you're going to get a lot longer battery life for that, and you can see the battery chart right here. Note also the MIP-based display has a solar panel on top of that. All of the Instinct 3 editions with MIP have solar. There are no non-solar editions of the Instinct 3 from a MIP standpoint, versus the AMOLED has no solar panel in it. But you know what? It still gets great battery life. I've been primarily using the AMOLED edition day after day, and I'm getting a solid 5-6 days easily on this watch, and that's with workouts of 1 to 3-4 hours a day. No problems at all. So Garmin's AMOLED display battery life is really good, arguably industry leading, and it's not really a limiter here. It's really about what kind of display type that you want. Equally, from a visibility standpoint, the AMOLED displays of today are not like the ones of even just 3 or 4 years ago. You can see these AMOLED displays in all lighting conditions without any problems at all. Gesture-based means as soon as you turn your wrist like this, the AMOLED display will go to full brightness, and you put it back down again, and it kind of dims out a little bit more, so it saves some battery. Likewise, at night with an AMOLED display, it goes into a sleep mode, and you can basically just press a button there to turn that back out. That way it doesn't blind you in the middle of the night where it just you put your wrist up and it's instead you just simply tap a button to see that, and you can also exit that sleep mode if you want to entirely. Meanwhile, on the Solar Edition, they changed out that display on the Instinct 3 compared to the 2 and the 2X. It is now much more clear. It's just really sharp. You can see kind of some comparison bits there. Point is, you have two options there. I will dive into the solar bits a little bit later on in terms of how solar works and all that kind of stuff, but you have your options there. And within that, you also have two sizes for each one. You have a 45 mil and you have a 50 mil. So you can see right here on the AMOLED, the two sizes side by side. The one my wife's been using on the left-hand side there, and then this one over here, the 50 mil, just slightly different in size, and that's also true for the solar side. So with that, I'm going to primarily be using the AMOLED edition in this video, and I will note cases where things are different, but they are very similar across the board. Maybe for just a minute or two, I'll kind of show you how similar they are as we walk through them. And hey, just a quick note as we go through this, if you're finding this video interesting and useful, just simply watch it all the way through. That is the only thing the YouTube gods care about at this point in time, is just watch time and you finishing the video. Put it on kind of like a podcast that you listen to behind the scenes, and that would really help out quite a bit. So this is the watch face right there, kind of starting off with some of the basics right here. This is the watch face. It is a non-touch screen on both of these. A little bit of a disappointment there. I think we all kind of hoped to be a touch screen, but you know, the first week or so, it was hard to get used to that coming from every other AMOLED display, especially in the case of the AMOLED being touchscreen. But after a few days, I finally got used to not being able to touch there. And I don't use a touch a ton on my watch just for maps and stuff. And since this doesn't have maps, it's not a big deal. Now you can of course customize this watch face right there. You can change all the different things on it using either the default watch Watchfaces, or using ConnectIQ. That's their third-party app store, and you can download Watchfaces onto that. But if I were to just go ahead and middle left button right there, so this one over here, hold on to it, you can go into Watchface, and then you can change a bunch of the different settings here. You can change the default watch faces, you can add new watch faces, but you can see just a couple of the ones as I iterate through this. There's only one stock one right now on this Instinct 3 Solar, but there are plenty others that you can download, and you can customize all the different data fields on there. Now, speaking of those buttons, there are 5 buttons in total. On the right-hand side, there are 2 buttons right there, and the left-hand side, there are 3 buttons right there. Essentially, the upper right-hand button is for confirmation, opening up a sport menu. The lower right-hand button is kind of an escape or back button, and these buttons on the side over here are for navigation through menus. As you saw earlier, I can just simply long hold this middle button there to open up a settings menu, and then up and down from there. In addition, this top left-hand button right there goes ahead and opens up the controls menu. So I can long hold that for a second, and here's the controls menu. That's where I can access a flashlight or Garmin Pay or any of the sort of the quick access control features. You can always escape back out of that by pressing the lower right-hand button to get back to the watch face. Now, going on down from that, you have the widgets, or the widget glances in this case. You can see the differences right away between the 2 different display types. Obviously a little bit simpler there. In the case in the Solar, also having Solar. But if I were to compare like versus like, so we can crack open the weather right now, just compare this one widget area to see what that looks like. See, there are slight differences there, but overall very, very similar. Only in some of the different panels of that and more detailed information will you see some of those differences. Backing out again, all of these widgets are customizable, so you can get rid of ones you don't want, you can add ones you want, you can tweak how they display, the order of them, etc. Going down through here, this is both kind of daily activity metrics like steps and calories and so on, also training metrics, as well as your calendar. You can do moon phases, notifications, training readiness, and at the very bottom, you've got the ability to go ahead and edit that. You also can add third-party ones through the ConnectIQ App Store. So you saw up here, I had the one for Komoot, that's for basically downloading Komoot routes as well as Komoot maps. That's the only way you can get maps on this. But the Komoot mapping experience, not because of Komoot's fault, is very hard to use on this because it doesn't have a touchscreen, so you can't really move your way around the map very easily. So it works in a pinch, but it's not necessarily super amazing. Any case, at the very bottom here, you can see the edit option. We can crack that open, and you go down to the bottom again, and you can add new widgets. So right there, I can add, down one more time, there we go, and I can create folders if I want to go ahead and basically categorize things, like maybe you want sports stuff in one folder and health stuff in another, and whatever the case is. And you can add all sorts of different widgets into this. In many ways, this has almost the same widget list as something like the Garmin Fenix series, but there are a couple more the Fenix has, but by and large, it's very, very similar across the board. Now, going on back, we go down into the health panel, and this is where you're going to see most of your daily metrics. So if I open this up right there, you're going to see the first one is body battery. Now, this is the watch I've been wearing, the AMOLED one all day long, so you'll see that body battery throughout the day. Body battery is, think of it, well, just like it says, your body battery throughout the day. You would ideally start your day relatively high. In my case, I started my day at 51, kind of so-so sleep last night, and then of course the day, different activities will go ahead and decrease that battery. And then inversely, if you were to take a nap, it would increase that battery. This does support tracking of naps, so you can do that if you want to. And if we go down again, you will see some of those factors in there. So you can see the sleep factor. That is basically, if I open this up, it shows my sleep details and so on. We'll get to sleep in just a second. But if I had done a workout here, it would show how much that reduced from my body battery. I haven't done a workout yet today, so we're not going to see that right there. Going on back real quick here, we'll go down. We see our sleep information, again, back in the kind of the health panel, if you will. And this is where I can open things up and see my sleep details. So sleep score 73 for the night, sleep duration 7 hours and 5 minutes, quality fair and calm. I can go down, I can see my sleep phases and stages over the course of the night. I don't worry too much about sleep phases and stages in terms of accuracy. It's really hard to judge from an accuracy standpoint because the comparative technologies just aren't all that accurate, like in the mid 80 percentile range in a best case scenario. So instead I really focus on, did it get the time I went to sleep correct and the time I woke up correct? And in the case of the Instinct 3, it's nailed all those. I don't tend to have many problems anymore with Garmin watches. I have little kids and they wake up at all assortment times of the night, and it does a really good job of tracking. Even if I go back to bed early in the morning at 5 or 6 or something like that for another hour or two, it tracks that pretty well. Backing out of here, we can see nap tracking there, no naps today. You can either manually start a nap if you want to, that allows you to set an alarm, or you can just simply fall asleep, and it does a pretty good job of that. I do find it tends to do a better job though when I'm lying down for nap tracking versus sometimes sitting up on a couch or whatnot, or especially like an airplane or a train, doesn't seem to track the naps as well there. Down below that, we've got the heart rate tracking. This is going to track throughout the day my heart rate. Obviously, I've just taken this off, so you're not going to see it there, but you can see my average resting heart rate over the last 7 days, and of course the last few hours. Backing out again, we've got HRV status. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, this video is sponsored by Precision Fuel and Hydration. I've been using Precision Fuel and Hydration for quite a number of years now, along with my wife in all of my training and racing needs. In fact, the moment I finish filming this, we're going to be going to the airport to head to a race where she's going to be racing, and she'll be using Precision Fuel and Hydration products in that race. But it's not just us that's using it, it's also pro teams, Major League Baseball teams, NFL teams, both the men and the women's side of the Pro Tour, as well as people just doing crazy adventures. When I go out on some of my adventures, one of the things you can do is to call up Precision Fuel and Hydration and have a Zoom call with them. You can basically spend like 20 minutes with them, with their sports scientists, talking about what your race or event goals are, and they'll talk through what exact products to use, and it's totally free. Like, it's super cool. I did that before my last crazy hike that I did, a couple-day trek across Madeira, and they were really useful in trying to figure out what I should do to be able to blend kind of the Precision Fuel products with real food, because I was doing like 14-hour days, day after day, and carrying all my own stuff with me. The cool part though, you can try it yourself. If you use the coupon code on the screen right there, you get 15% off your first order. Thanks again to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring this video. HRV status is heart rate variability status. Essentially, it's measuring the timing in between the heartbeats. And you know, people differ a little bit on this in terms of how their HRV trends over time. For most people though, a lower value like 20 or 30s would indicate more stress or fatigue, versus a higher value tends to be more recovery. And again, the scale varies. So the fact that my balanced here is at 50, it could be quite different than yours. Yours could be something like my wife's balanced is much, much higher, 60, 70. And then one of my friends, Des of DesFit, is balanced just more like 30 or so. So again, the actual numbers aren't as important as kind of where you vary. But in a nutshell, to get your HRV status, you need essentially 19 nights of sleep first with your Garmin watch, or a Garmin watch, and then it'll keep that data from there on out and start to kind of build out your profile. Within that, I can look at any given night. So here's last night's HRV status over the course of the night. And then we go down again, and you can see the 7-day average, and then down again, my baseline over the last 4 weeks. Now, there are some good scenarios where you see the difference between the AMOLED and the Solar Edition, and this is one of them right there. This chart right there, the bottom one right there, it does not exist on the Solar Edition for whatever reason. I don't really know why, but it doesn't show up on the Solar Edition, so that's something to keep in mind. I find HRV tracking a really good general indicator, especially recovering from sickness or going into sickness. And so, you know, there are a lot of factors for HRV that'll impact it. So one of them is how much sleep you've got, of course, fatigue, jet lag, drugs, alcohol, and drugs being both like good, normal drugs that you may be taking, or maybe not so good drugs, whatever you want to classify that as. All those things will absolutely impact your HRV status. So just because the number goes down doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. Like if you had a really hard training session, you did like a crazy trek or something like that, your HRV is going to plummet because your body's recovering. So you have to know why it's actually dropping, whether it's because you're not feeling well or because you just did some hard workouts the last few days and your body needs more time to recover. So backing out of there real quick, we'll go back out to here. Here you can see, of course, your steps, and of course, across the entire day. I can go down again, see my day streak, doing a lot more riding the last week or so, so we're seeing less steps this week, and then the distance for each day. Going on back again, go down to pulse ox. This is the feature I tend to leave off. Pulse ox is your blood oxygenation levels at night, but it burns the crap out of batteries, especially on Garmin watches. And so Garmin has a much higher granularity level when it comes to the pulse ox or blood oxygenation level compared to most of their competitors, but that comes at the cost of a lot more battery. By default, it is off, and I leave it off for both sleep and regular wear. So just my recommendation there. But that is your stats within this from a general health standpoint. There are a gazillion other stats that you can do, like respiration rate, and you can trend this, etc. You can see this on the watch, or you can see all these stats in the Garmin Connect mobile app, just like these screenshots right there. And you can then trend them over very long periods of time if you want to. So everything is in the Garmin Connect mobile app. You know, people have varying opinions on that app, but there's no app in the sports fitness world that has as much depth as the Garmin Connect mobile app does. Whether or not you find that depth a bit too deep, if that makes sense, is up to you, but you can customize it quite a bit. Now, the last thing to talk about is kind of related to that, which is settings. You can change settings on the watch by we'll escape back to the watch face real quick. So we're back to here, and then we'll long hold this middle left-hand button to get to the settings menu, and then we'll just simply go down using the lower left-hand button. And this is where all the different settings are. And just like the Garmin Connect mobile app, there are a million settings on our Garmin watch. Some people think there's too many settings, but I think most people kind of get used to that over time. You can change those settings on the watch or on the Garmin Connect mobile app. That's something Garmin added in the last couple years, and now virtually every single setting you can change on the mobile app or change on the watch. It's really your choice. Okay, so let's talk about one of my favorite features, which is the flashlight. I know this will sound Inspector Gadget to some people, and I say this all the time, but it is by far my favorite feature on this watch, and for a lot of people, it's like a hard stop now. For my wife, she is hard stop. She will not use a watch without a flashlight anymore. So the way the flashlight works on this watch is it's actually a real flashlight on the top. If I were to double tap this up there, you'll see the flashlight turns on. I can double tap this one. It is both a red and a white flashlight. So if I were to double tap this, turn it off, and then turn it back on again, just so you can see the settings control menu there, you'll see at the bottom, I can increase this from the one red setting to 4 different white settings. So you can go ahead and change the brightness level. That way you can see it. And I find this most useful, obviously, in dark scenarios at night, but not just like hiking and tents and crazy adventure things, but more practical things like getting around a hotel room in the middle of the night. As I mentioned earlier on, jumping out of a plane here, and I've got like 4 different hotels over the next week. Also though, in the sport modes, you can have the flashlight automatically sync to your cadence. So if you're out running and maybe it's a bit dark and you forgot a light or whatever the case is, you can turn on the flashlight and have it essentially sync to your cadence and act as a bit of a strobe light so people around you can see you. You can also access the flashlight using the controls menu, long hold up here, and then go down to flashlight right there. And then you got this menu to turn it on, and you can go up and down here. Let's turn off the flashlight now and go into the sports menus. So I'm just gonna escape back to the watch face right there, and then press the upper right hand button, and on a Garmin watch, that'll always get you to the sport menu. And here is all the sports that you can choose from on the screen right now, so plenty of sports to choose from right there. And you can go ahead and pin these sports to the top of this list if you want to, based on what your favorites are. So you can see I've pinned hike and run and bike and pool swim and open water swim, trail run, stand-up paddleboard, and so on. But if I go on down from there, I've got more options down at the very bottom, the little plus. I'm just gonna move that one out of the way for now. And you can see all the different sports by categories. Garmin typically will add sport modes over time. I would expect to see more sport modes added over time. To these watches, Garmin's actually added a lot to the Instinct 2 series, for example, over the last couple years, and I would expect the same for the Instinct 3. Now, going back here, I'm just gonna start over again and choose the run to go into show some options. So I'll tap this again to select it. At this point, it's gonna give me my daily suggested workout, which today is telling me to rest, which I'm good with. And the reason, of course, it's telling me to rest is because I've had, I think, like 4 or 5 straight days of pretty hard training workouts back there. And now it's like, yo, you've probably done a little bit too much right now, which is fine. I can also say, nah, I'm good with that, and go to more suggestions and see what else will give me. And it's got a base workout for tomorrow, a rest day, a sprint workout. And if I open that, you can see this workout for running and the sprints that it's got there. So the way this works on a Garmin watch, these daily suggested workouts, is by default, it's just gonna try to make you stronger and stronger over time. Relatively straightforward. And it's gonna use all of your data history to do that. And so it's gonna give you workouts that are appropriate for your history based on what it knows about you. Thus, if you've just started with the watch, it's gonna take a few weeks. Really, it kind of finds its groove at about the 4-week marker when it's got plenty of data on your athletic history to figure things out. But the second way you can do that is if you put items on your Garmin Connect calendar, events or races. So you can go in the Garmin Connect app, you can add an event or race to it, just like that right there. And when you do that, it'll go ahead and automatically start changing your workouts, either bike or run, for that event. It could be a marathon, it could be a bike race, etc. Put it on the calendar, it's gonna do a taper for you, and you'll see the different phases or stages within that. So you'll see, for example, your build phase and your kind of peaking phase and recovery phase, all within the watch. It's super cool, and the suggestions it gives are very legit. Like, it'll do a really good job of getting you ready for that race. In general, though, it'll err slightly on the side of caution in terms of favoring a little bit more recovery and rest than going towards too hard and getting you injured, which I think is a fair thing. You can, though, also add a set training plan if you don't want like the nebulousness of this, where it'll change it automatically on the fly if you had poor sleep or you did too much yesterday, whatever the case is. You can do a structured set schedule or calendar for that race. You can go in the Garmin Connect app, you can choose what event type you're doing, and you're just gonna put a whole slate of workouts on your calendar, regardless of what's going on in your life, versus with the daily suggested workouts and you put an event on your calendar, it'll automatically change based on what's happening. And you can choose, for example, what day your long run is, or you can choose what days you want to skip and so on. In any case, skipping out of this for right now, we'll go back into run. And then this is the run screen where you can see my GPS status at the top, the battery, as well as any sensor connectivity if I had any sensors connected. Right now I don't, so no worries about that. Versus if I were to go ahead and go into bike mode, it would connect to some of those sensors back there on the bike. Meanwhile, if I hold the left-hand button for a second, we can go into the run settings. Here, you can change all of your individual run settings. I open this up one more time. You can change your data screens. You can go down further. You can add data screens. You can tweak data screens. So going on down to the very bottom, I can choose to add a new data screen. I can choose custom data, and you can see the number of fields I want to put on each individual one. You can have numerous different data pages, and then each one can have up to 6 data fields per page in different configurations. So for example, this 6 field one versus this 6 field one, and you can change every single field that you put on there. So I just confirm this right now. I can choose data field 1, go through all the different data fields here, and again, there are tons and tons of different data fields to choose from, covering pretty much everything you could possibly want. I can also escape back out of this, back one more time, and you can choose kind of more generalized data screens. So for example, running dynamics, virtual partner, compass, elevation, music, clock, and then on mine already, I have, for example, the heart rate gauge there set up. I've got the map page, and map in this case just simply means a blank slate where you'd have a route drawn on. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. I can go up here again, time of day, and these are the lap page there, as well as the base page. And again, you can customize these. Back into the run settings, you can add alerts. For example, you can add a cadence alert, or a distance alert, or time alert, a heart rate alert, a pace alert, and so on. You can go down here, go back one more time. You can turn on and off the metronome if you want to try to be pacing your cadence to a given beat. You can turn on auto lap, by default set for 1 mile or 1 kilometer, depending on whether you have metric or imperial setup or statute setup. You can do auto pause, auto climb, turn on and off running power, have the lap key, and you can broadcast your heart rate. Broadcasting heart rate is cool when you have a third-party app. For example, I've got my trainer back there and I use Zwift with it on an iPad. This allows me to connect up to Zwift and broadcast my heart rate into the app. Exact same thing on Peloton, where you want to go ahead and just have it use the optical heart rate on your wrist, and then Peloton can read that. It does that across both AMP Plus as well as Bluetooth Smart. In the next one there's that strobe option that I mentioned earlier on. So go ahead and turn on the strobe. You can choose based on cadence or on a couple different kind of pulse types, if you will. And then you can say, you know what, I want it on only after sunset or off, etc. So it's not something I tend to use, but it's kind of neat to have that feature there if you want it. Now, next you've got the satellite type. By default, it's going to use something called auto select. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, so hang tight for that one there, and just remember where that setting is for later. Beyond that, you can add structured training to it. So for example, you can go ahead and add different structured workouts, ones that you download from Garmin Connect, as I mentioned earlier, ones that you create on the Garmin Connect app, like this right here, or you get created from a third-party platform like Training Peaks or whatever it may be, pushed to your watch. Those are all here. You can also do a quick workout where you just simply make intervals based on time and distance and whatnot, and just simply get out the door. So I tend to use structured workouts downloaded from Garmin Connect via Training Peaks or other platforms, but again, the world's your oyster there. Once you're ready to actually do that workout, you just go up to the top here, back one more time, and just simply press this top right hand button, and then you're off and running, quite literally. So here you'll see your data pages. I'm going to put some on the screen right now to what it actually looks like while you're out running as you've configured them. It's really as simple as that. You can always pause your workout at any point in time by pressing the upper right hand button. Just simply pauses it, and then you can go ahead and either resume that if you want to. You can save it. You can also resume later. Let's say you're hiking or whatnot and you want to simply pause it for the night. You want one big thing over the course of multiple days. You can do that, or if you're just stopping for a few hours, you don't want it to accidentally get bumped or ended or whatever, just hit resume later and then go back into the sport menu afterwards to resume that particular activity. Once you've completed your activity, you hit the save button instead, and you get a summary on your watch. You're going to see basically your totals at the top, and then all the different categories as you scroll through this list here will show you the stats for those categories. Now, there's a lot of stats here, but there's even more stats in the Garmin Connect app. So you can open up the Garmin Connect app and you can see all those stats there. You can dive into them. And of course, if you do have a connection to Strava or Training Peaks or whatnot, it'll go ahead and sync to that as well automatically within like 3 seconds. It's very, very quick. And you can see those stats there. Again, just like with the Garmin Connect mobile app for general health stats, there is a gazillion stats here. Some people find it overwhelming, but most find they've done a pretty good job of boiling the most important stats to the top, and then you can dig as deep as you'd like to go ahead and get the rest of those stats. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that you can tweak is that satellite mode. I want to mention this very quickly because it's super, super interesting. So if I go back here and I just open up the sports settings, middle left-hand button there, run settings, and I go down to satellite mode. There we go. Satellites. You've got a couple different modes here. By default, you will be in what's called auto select, which Garmin also from a marketing standpoint called SatIQ. What SatIQ does is it automatically uses all the satellites that you have available to you, multiband or dual frequency satellites, when it needs it, like for example, up against a rock cliff or, next to a cave or whatever the case is in hard conditions, in buildings in, downtown New York, it'll use that. But that, of course, costs more power and it reduces your battery life. Versus the other end, you have something like GPS only, which is very, very basic. It has an amazing battery life, but the accuracy may not be quite as good in complex situations. But in really easy situations, like an open field or just, very light tree cover, it's gonna have no problems. And so it's gonna automatically, dynamically switch between the different modes that it needs to give you the most battery life. And it's really the only company that does that, and it's a huge hardware advantage for Garmin, something they've done in the last couple of years that really helps them from an accuracy standpoint and battery perspective as well. Now, why I mention this is because the default is auto select and it does an exceptionally good job. But if you need more battery, you can go down to GPS only. And in my review, one of the things I did was I did a bunch of workouts, including a 12-hour, 70-kilometer hike in just the GPS only mode to see one, what the battery life was like, and two, what the accuracy was like even into the mountains. And it's really impressive. And I would say for the vast majority of the people, unless you had a bunch of different GPS watches at the same time like I did, you would never notice the difference between the GPS tracks. Now, once you get into something like New York City, that's a bit different because of the reflections and the way things work, and you really want that multi-band or dual frequency option there. But for most scenarios, you don't need that. Now, if you did want to force it into multi-band, you can do all plus multi-band like you see right there, which does force it into multi-band all the time, but you're going to burn a bit more battery life. Again, here's that battery chart right there, just something to think about. Note that you can set this on a per sport profile basis. Maybe some sport profiles you want it at a higher setting, whatnot, but you can also set it across the board for all of your workouts, unless you change it otherwise, by going into settings, satellites, and auto select as my default for all profiles, and then I can have an individual sport profile override that. Okay, so now we talked about the sport side of it. We've completed a workout. We talked about satellites. Let's talk about some of the training readiness and training status and training load recovery type stats. So I'm gonna go back out of this, back to the main menu, and I'm gonna go down until you see training. There we go. So opening this up, I've got my training readiness, training status, my FTP and VO2 max, and last activity. So we're going to start off with my training readiness. This is the one that's most applicable to everyone if you don't care about like training from a high performance sport standpoint. Training readiness is good across the board. And what training readiness is essentially telling you is exactly what its name is. Your readiness to train at any point in time during that day. So right now, see my readiness to train is 42 out of 100. And the factors that get into that are sleep, recovery time, HRV status, acute load, in other words, how much training have you done in the last 7 days, as well as sleep history and stress history. The most important ones for this are really sleep and effectively via the recovery side. So if your recovery is super high and your sleep's bad, it's going to tell you to chill out. It gives you then the score here of 42. The interesting part though is this score for most people will slowly rise over the course of the day because your recovery time is going down. So if I open this up, right now my recovery time is 16 hours remaining. So as this ticks down, it's basically saying, hey, you're closer to being ready to train for your next hard workout. That's what recovery time is really telling you. But it also notes that it's delayed by poor sleep. And my sleep wasn't super great last night, some like middle of the night kid interruptions. So it wasn't amazing, thus it's delayed recovery because of that. Going on back here, you can see my HRV status we talked about earlier was good. My acute load is optimal right now. This green range right there is called the tunnel. So basically that is my normal range as of last little while. Generally speaking, my green tunnel here is roughly between 1,000 and 2,000, but over the holidays, so I'm filming this in early February, and over roughly, the holiday time period, I reduced my training load as I usually do, and so my tunnel kind of reduced itself long term over the course of a 30-day period, and now I'm slowly building that back up again. That little dot there though is the last 7 days. So you can see I haven't done a workout yet today. So my training load for today is basically the 7-day average, if you will. That right now is sitting at 879, versus if I did a workout now, that would pump that higher and probably just be the upper edge of that green area there. Going on down further, you've got the sleep history, stress history, and then we're back to sleep for last night. So the idea with training readiness is that it should grow over the course of the day, but then if I did a workout right now, that training readiness value would drop probably to the low teens because I just did a hard workout, thus my readiness to train is much lower. I find in general this is a pretty good indicator of how things are going. For some people, the scales aren't quite always nailed. For example, my wife, her training readiness is always really low. Even when she has amazing sleep and her training load's exactly where she wants it, it doesn't quite seem to work out. But I think for me and a lot of the people, it's a really interesting way of kind of balancing things. Now, going on back here into this, we have training status. Now, think about training readiness as a day-to-day thing on, are you ready to train based on all of your life factors, versus training status is really focused just on the sport side of things. And so it really has 3 core things that it cares about. 1 is your VO2 max value, 2 is your heart rate variability, and 3 is your acute load. And the reason it cares about those 3 things is they act as checks and balance for each other, meaning that if your acute load is crazy high, like you're doing a training camp or something like that, but your HRV status is showing a balance, meaning that you're doing a good job recovering each night, and your VO2 max isn't showing as going down, then it's going to say, you know what, you're probably still all right. But if your training load spikes up really high, your HRV status starts to plummet, and your VO2 max starts to flatline and go downhill, that's a sign that you're just doing too much. And that's where you can get the dreaded unproductive message that has been kind of popular with Garmin watches over the last couple of years. But that message is much more difficult to get in 2025, 2024, even 2023, because of the changes Garmin made around training status 2.0, which is what you see here. So if I go down from here, you'll see those factors again. Acute load, like we just looked at a second ago. Go on back. We have load focus. So basically all these different focus areas or types of training balanced, and you can see they're pretty much in the optimal ranges right there. Go on back again one more time. We have my VO2 max right now, and then go down here again, and you can see HRV status. If I look at my VO2 max, you can see how it's shifting over time as I ramp back up into some of my harder workouts after the holidays. And then this shows the last 4 weeks or so. And the idea being that your VO2 max should be either steady or increasing. Obviously, VO2 max is not going to increase forever. Eventually, you'll flatline based on your genetic profile or whatnot. So the goal isn't to go forever upwards, but to at least get to kind of your normal steady state, if you will, after being well trained for a while. Now, going up to acute load, you'll notice one more kind of new thing in the Instinct 3 series. Go down here. You've got this we just showed about, the exercise load as it's categorized per day, but also here load ratio. Load ratio is essentially looking at how your 7-day load, in other words, last week's worth of load, compares to the last 30 days worth of load. It's really as simple as that. And essentially, if they were exactly the same as an average, then they'd be 1.0. But of course, you're allowed to go a little bit higher than that because that's how you get better trained, more fit, etc. So you want to have this be just a little bit higher here so you're getting more fit over time. But if you did too much, if you do way too much this week compared to your norm, that's where you run the risk of injury. In the inverse side, if you go down there and you're just doing a fraction of what you normally do, then you could either be recovering or tapering for something, which is a recovery status, or you get to a point where you're probably just going to go ahead and start losing some of your fitness gains. So this is new in the Instinct 3, but has been around on Garmin's other watches for a while. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the training load bits. One more thing I want to mention very quickly though is the sensor connectivity. So I'm going to go back to the watch face here, middle button right there, and we'll go down into sensors and accessories. This is where I can pair new sensors or connect to any sort of ANT Plus or Bluetooth smart sensor. So I've got my bike back there, and you can see I've got different power meters for different bikes floating around here. I go down, I can also turn on and off the wrist heart rate, pulse ox, compass, altimeter, and so on. But if I go back up here to the top, I click add new, and this is where I can search for sensors. I can search for all sensors nearby, or I can search for a certain sensor type and then pair that one sensor type. So I'm just going to go back to the top here, search all sensors, and now it's going to look across both ANT Plus and Bluetooth Smart. Here are the sensor types it connects to, listed at the bottom of the screen right now. I'll just simply turn this on real quick. wake up these two trainers, and we'll get some sensors here. It's bound to find something back there. There's like 3 power meters in each of those bikes, and something's bound to show up. In fact, I can even turn on the radar right here. That'll do the trick too. Okay, there we go. Now we got some things showing up. So we got a power meter, we got a speed and cadence sensor, we got a trainer. I can show Bluetooth sensors as well. So you can see the Dreddo trainer over there. I've got my Quark power meter and so on. From here, I can just simply save one of these just like that. And now it's saved. And I can go back and I can see the sensor details. If I go down here at the bottom, back one more time, down here at the bottom, and it'll reconnect to this in just a second. Usually after it pairs, it takes a couple seconds to go ahead and reconnect to it, and it's as simple as that. You can name sensors if you'd like to. You can go ahead and disable them, enable them. You go configure things like the calibration if you want to, or crank length for some power meters, and so on. And you can save multiple sensors of the same type in case you have multiple bikes like this here. Okay, so at this point, we're done from a sports standpoint, but I want to talk about navigation and routing, and then we'll get into some of the solar features, Garmin Pay, and wrap things up. So let's talk about navigation. Now, the bad news on this watch is there's no maps, and I've gone down that entire rant on my review, but the fact that there's no maps on this watch. So we're going to talk about what it does have, which is breadcrumb style navigation. That means it's going to go ahead and allow you to navigate a route. It's going to give you turn-by-turn steps, but you won't see a map behind it like you would see on a Garmin Fenix series. Still, it works. That's what many watches have had for like a decade now. But at this point in 2025, a lot of watches tend to have maps at this price point, so that is a pretty big gap. In any case, the way this works here, I'll open up both of these just for fun. So I'm going to go there. I'm going to open up a hike. There we go. Choose both. Yep, no problem. And then on the hike, I'm going to hold the left-hand button here to find navigation. So we'll go down, navigation. We're going to open that up. I'm going to go to courses. There we go, courses. And I'm going to find my hike from the other day. I think I still got it in here. Chile Island. Is this on this one here? There we go, Chile Island. This is about a 55K route that I did, ended up being 60K once I finish things up. And I can then choose to look at the map on this, and you're gonna see this breadcrumb style map. You'll notice in general, the Solar is a little bit slower than the AMOLED. There are some cases where it's a lot slower, like saving a long workout, anything over an hour actually, it's a lot slower to save than the AMOLED is instant. The Solar just takes forever. There's simply different processing in that behind the scenes to get the battery life they need. In this case, I can zoom out like this, I can zoom in. You'll notice I zoom out here, you start to see the cities there. So this is something that is new on the Instinct 3 series, which is the addition of cities. So they put city dots on here, just the dot representing the city. In this case, that city is like 20 kilometers away from me roughly. It's not super useful. It's not really useful at all actually, because around where I was there are tons of little towns there, and that would have been super useful. Like if I needed an emergency to get to a town and my phone was dead or whatever the case is, if I could see those towns nearby, that'd be great. But this is like legit big cities, and there's a gazillion towns that are much closer. That would have been much more useful. Now, I can zoom in and out, but I can also tap this upper right hand button here, and you see the little dots? This allows me to then change if I want to go up or down. I can tap again to go right or left. This is where a touchscreen would have been helpful, especially on the AMOLED side. I don't really understand that. Garmin has touchscreens for both MIP and AMOLED. It just seems like a bit of a weird gap there. In any case, tapping back once real quick. There we go. If I go to go down to elevation plot here, you can see the elevation plot of this particular route. This is in meters this time, but you'll see basically the duration of this, the elevation plot, and the total ascent that I had. So 1,884 meters ascent, about 6,000 feet or so. And it basically started from the ocean and ended pretty much at the ocean. I can go ahead and go back here. There we go, back once. I can do this course right away. I can also do the course in reverse, which is handy in cases you just want to go backwards on something. So that's an option there. Once I'm ready to go though, I just simply choose do course, just like that, and I'll go ahead and get that course loaded up. Again, you might see kind of the loading time side by side on this course. Also, there's no limits anymore on course durations from a course point standpoint. It used to be a very legit problem in the older Instinct series and even older Garmin watches to have very short course durations. Garmin got rid of those limits in the Instinct series about 15 months or so now ago. The key thing to do though is to get a route into Garmin Connect, the platform. So whether that's coming from Strava, Komoot, a GPX file, anything, don't try to put the GPX file directly on the watch. Just simply import it into Garmin Connect. That's beneficial for two reasons. One, it'll correct any elevation problems with that, and a lot of platforms send bad elevation. Even Komoot, I find, will often send bad elevation in mountainous areas. That's just not super accurate. Garmin's elevation data tends to be much more accurate than Komoot or even Strava, so it'll automatically correct that. The other thing it allows you to do is to add waypoints, which I love adding waypoints into there. So waypoints I can add on Garmin Connect. I choose a point on the map, I give it a icon, I give it a name, and then while I'm out there hiking, it'll show in the up ahead list, which basically means it'll tell me how far until that next waypoint. It'll list all my waypoints sequentially and how far along the trail, so not as the bird flies, but as the trail goes, until that waypoint. When it comes to turn notifications, the watch will automatically give you a turn notification as you reach those turns. Pretty straightforward. It'll basically about 50 meters out while you're hiking say, hey, turn coming up, turn left or turn right. You get a little chirp and you know to turn. If you go off course, you get an off course notification. Off course is roughly 50 meters off course. It'll give you a notification. But because there's no maps on this, it won't route you back to the course. It just simply says, yo, your course is over there. Go figure it out. It's really as simple as that. So also see where you are on that elevation profile over the course of the entire hike or journey, whatever it may be. But you're not going to see per climb elevation details like you would in a Phoenix series or a 400-955 or 400-965 with Garmin's Climb Pro. This is what Climb Pro looks like right there. It automatically subdivides every single climb and descent up and tells you how far to the top, both in height as well as distance, as well as your average gradient remaining and your time and all that kind of fun stuff. It's like an awesome software feature if you spend a lot of time in the mountains. But unfortunately, it is not on this watch because this watch doesn't have maps, so a bit of a bummer there. Otherwise, from a navigation standpoint, it works just fine. Note that the routes, as you can see on this map right here, if I do side by side between a Phoenix and an Instinct series, the Instinct series will kind of truncate some of the different curves and whatnot. It wasn't really an issue out in the real world in terms of having some of that data being reduced, if you will, in terms of granularity, but just note that that is the case. Now, one thing that's cool on the Instinct 3 is the addition of Garmin Share. So I'm going to back up a bunch here. I'm just going to go back to the base of the beginning here, right? There we go. And then I'm going to open up, go down into the apps list or the sports list. They're kind of one and the same in the new Garmin world here. And I'm going to go down into Garmin Share. There we go, right there. What Garmin Share allows you to do is just send routes and things like waypoints and workouts and courses back and forth between watches without any phone nearby. That's useful because the Garmin Connect app on your phone requires internet. Now, Garmin has another app called Garmin Explore, which allows you to get routes and whatnot from your phone into the watch without internet. So that's where I basically download those maps ahead of time into Garmin Explore. So I'm out hiking, something comes up, I need to change my mind or whatever the case is, I can do that from the Garmin Explore app, but that still requires your phone. But this here, let's say you get to a trailhead, your buddy's got a watch, they've got a compatible Garmin watch, so anything made in the last 2 or 3 years roughly, Garmin Share allows you to send things back and forth. So in this case, this one's already set up, the AMOLED already set up for Garmin Share. On this right-hand side, I'm gonna go ahead and confirm this is like a brand new watch, if you will. There we go. Okay, okie dokes, perfect. Now this one's ready to receive, and this one's also ready to go. I'm gonna go down and press to share something right there. I'm gonna share one of my courses. I'm just gonna choose a course. Let's see, what's something, airport run home, there we go. And I have to share, yep. And now over here, this one's ready to receive. You can see, select a device you're gonna send it to, Instinct 3, 50mm. That's what this one is right there. On this side here, I'm gonna get it in a second. I'll basically say, hey, are you sure this is what you wanna receive? It's gonna confirm this. There we go. Instinct 3, 50mm. They're both Instinct 3, 50mm, but solar, you get the point, right? Over there, I choose to confirm this. It'll usually confirm a key code back and forth, or a pin code, if you will. There we go. Yep, those two are confirmed, no problem. And then it'll send that over. It doesn't take too long, but it of course does depend on the duration, the file size effectively between these two things. It is sending this via Bluetooth. In the past, Garmin had this feature on watches many years ago, and they took it away. In the past, it was via ANT, but now it's via Bluetooth. And there we go, sharing is complete. At this point, I could load this up in there. I could also, you saw there briefly, it said share again. If I have multiple people in the group, I can share again. I just wanted to kind of mention that. It's a cool little feature that's something that's new on the Instinct 3. Okay, so at this point, let's talk about Garmin Pay, and then we'll talk about Solar and wrap things up. So Garmin Pay is something they've added to the Instinct 3 series. Is standard across the board. Garmin Pay is essentially just NFC payments. You can go ahead and load your credit card onto the watch, and then you're good to go. As I mentioned, it's now standard on all Instinct 3 watches, versus in the past, it was only certain editions. The way you load your card is you first double check if your bank is supported. There's roughly 1,600 banks globally that are supported. It is not just all Visa cards or all Amex cards, etc. It's on a per bank standpoint. So it's quite the lift to deal with globally. But you know, if you're in the US, all the major credit card issuers are on there. And if you're in other countries, it's kind of hit or miss. Some countries it's like, boom, we got everything. Some countries it's just simply nothing. Garmin has a list on the website with every single bank organized by country. Once that's done, you go into the Garmin Connect mobile app and you choose to add a credit card to Garmin Pay. You'll run through this. It takes like 60 seconds and you're done. It's on your watch. Now, to use it, you hold up the left-hand button right there for a second and you go and choose Wallet right there. And you're going to enter your passcode in. I'm going to enter it in. It's secret. And then once you got the last digit here, you'll see it says hold near reader and it shows my credit card there. And you've got, whatever it is, 20 or 30 seconds to do that tappity tap. As you tappity tap, it turns green and you've paid for something. It's frankly as simple as that. It is not complex. It works great. It does not matter what the NFC reader is. I have had no problems with this. Globally, it just works just fine. Okay, so the last thing then to talk about is Solar Edition bits. So we're gonna get rid of the at one and bring over my solar friends here. This guy's been warm right now. He's been sitting in the sun over there the entire time. Now, solar, as I mentioned earlier on, is only on the MIP-based display. And the solar panels changed quite a bit on the Instinct 3 compared to the Instinct 2. The very first thing you're going to notice right away is the lack of that reddish kind of hue around the outside edge. Might be hard to see right there. I'll put some other footage in if it's better to see there. It is now purely black around the outside edge and much, much more powerful. And so just for kind of like understanding that, these two watches have been side by side the entire day here. And let's look at the solar gains that you've had. 701 lux hours versus 517 lux hours. So almost like 50% more powerful. It's really, really powerful in terms of what it's pulling in. Now we're getting ahead of ourselves just slightly here though. So let's back up here and we'll just stick with one watch. Let's make life a little easier, right? So on a solar watch, a couple things. One, this is your sun icon in the upper right-hand corner there. It's divided up into, I believe, 10 chunks. Each chunk represents how much solar intensity you're getting at that point in time. Put it in the sun, it's gonna go ahead and show more solar intensity. Take it out of the sun, it's not going to show anything. Like right now, there's no chunks. When it's in full brightness sun, it'll be completely illuminated and say, hey, it's now full brightness. You can also see I've configured over there to show my solar gains along the top right there. Now, if I go down in this, you can see that same little solar chart right there over the course of the day. It'll actually last 6 hours to be precise. And here's the last 6 hours. The clouds are starting to come in kind of behind me here. And so the sun gains are going down slightly. Still 701 hours, lux hours is a lot of solar for this day. I'm sure this has gone up probably 20-25% in battery capacity over the course of the day. So it's just been sitting there the entire day. Certainly if you're wearing it though, you're not going to quite get as much. But I go into all of those solar gains in my review in terms of what that looks like. But in short, in some scenarios, I was burning less than 1% battery over the course of 3 hours of riding outside in the sun, where it was only covered like 30% of the time. So because I was doing a triangle and whatnot, I wasn't getting a ton of solar, but my battery was just really, really good in that GPS only configuration. You can go down from here and you can see my daily average. You can see I'm just shy of 400,000 lux hours per day, which is pretty strong. It's just been sitting out there every day for fun in the sun to see what it looks like. In the case of the Instinct 3, it's got more categories now that have that unlimited power option based on how much sun that you get. And of course, Garmin sets a minimum there of roughly 3 hours per day of sun. It doesn't take like crazy summer sun, like putting it the whole time. It just, you'll get those lux hours in just day-to-day usage without any problem if it's a sunny day. Of course, where it becomes even more interesting is if you're not really using GPS, but just want to use it as a smartwatch, you can easily do that in a sunnier environment and have unlimited power, no problems. Now in the past, Garmin would actually show you an unlimited battery icon. Here's a picture of it right there on the 2X, but that doesn't seem to be working as of this moment on the Instinct 3. I suspect I'll get that soon because I've had more than enough battery to be unlimited power, but hasn't quite happened yet. But anyway, it's kind of a cool little thing to see in your watch when you've like unlocked that achievement. Speaking of unlocking achievements, that is it. You have got to the end of this video. That's all I've got for you. If you did find this video interesting or useful, if you could just go ahead and whack that like button at the bottom there or hit subscribe, it'd really mean a lot. With that, have a good one.